Just when you can be independent.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the August webinar, this month's webinar. We are very much looking excited to this webinar this month. If you were with us in July for our July webinar, we had the top industry experts on surplus lines. This month, we have the echelon of adjuster licensing, bar none. So I want to welcome you. I'm very excited about the adjuster licensing experts we have on our team. The first one we have, and Rachel, if you'll wave, we have Rachel Chester. She is from the Rhode Island Department of Insurance, and she has been with Rhode Island's insurance division for over 10 years. And she is also chair of the NAIC's Adjuster Licensing Working Group, and she has been a member of SILA for 6 years. We also have Charlene Ferguson from the California Department of Insurance, and Charlene is the Chief of Licensing Services Division for California. And that includes not just agent licensing, but bail agents, adjusters, business entities, background checks. So Charlene has been with the California Department of Insurance for 26 years and a member of SILA for over 11 years. And we're also very excited to have Caitlin Small with us from Reg Ed. She is their regulatory specialist, and she has been with Reg Ed for over 9 years and a member of SILA for 7 years. And Caitlin monitors state regulation and process changes, and she's part of their registration and licensing team. She works with them to help them. So I want to welcome all three of you to today's webinar. We are very excited to have you. You are the top in the industry as far as knowledge in adjuster licensing, and this is a real treat. So with that, I want you to remind everybody this webinar is for 1 hour. Please put your questions into the chat. They will be monitored. If we have time, we'll address some of your questions at the end of the webinar, but any questions that don't get answered will be addressed via email. Please remember that this webinar is being recorded. So make sure you mute yourself in case there's dogs in the background that are barking. But the webinar will be available on the SILA Foundation library next week, and you will receive a link to the recording along with the PowerPoint slides in your post-webinar survey communication. And with that, I'm going to be passing this over to Caitlin Small. Caitlin, take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Julia. Thank you, Rachel and Charlene, for hosting this with me, and thank you for SILA for inviting us to do this. I know adjuster licensing is a hot topic in and of itself, so if you guys that are attending are new here and you're interested and you don't know anything about adjusters, hopefully this will be helpful. And then if you are very well versed in adjusters, hopefully this will be something that you'll learn something from today. And then Rachel and Charlene will also be able to provide some kind of regulator commentary on things that are going on in their state, their requirements, and kind of get some feedback from a state perspective on some of the current issues that are going on in adjuster licensing. So let's see here. All right, so what is an adjuster? The NAIC licensing handbook defines an adjuster as a person who investigates claims, determines coverage, examines relevant documents, inspects property damage, and they're also responsible for determining the amount of a claim, loss, damage payable under the insurance contract. So this is going to be different than your producer who is going to be selling the insurance. This is somebody who's adjusting under the terms of the policy that the producer has been selling. And if it was that simple, we could leave it at that, but there are 4 main types of adjuster licenses. The main 2 that we are going to be talking about today are going to be your independent adjuster and your staff, your company adjuster. But I did want to make sure that the public adjuster and emergency catastrophe adjuster did get spoken to, because they are important to be included. Your independent adjusters are going to be your individuals who are self-employed or associated with an independent adjusting firm that are hired to adjust losses on behalf of insurance companies. Staff adjusters are very similar in terms of adjusting claims and the job that they do, but the difference is who you work on behalf of is going to be the difference in these two license types, that staff or company adjusters are going to be your salaried employees of insurance companies who do the functions on behalf of that specific insurance company. Now, public adjusters, they are representing the insured. A lot of the resources you're going to find through SILA don't usually include the public adjuster. They're going to be mainly focused on your independent and your staff adjuster licenses, because those are kind of the main issues that we run into kind of in the industry surrounding those two. And then you have your emergency catastrophe adjusters, who don't necessarily need a license in the state where the catastrophe has been declared. These are going to be based on, state emergency provisions that you don't necessarily need to comply with the 2-year full requirements to work in that state on that catastrophe. But there is something you would have to qualify for in order to work for that catastrophe, whether it's, submitting a list of individuals to the state or submitting a registration. And whenever there is a storm that's declared, that the state usually, Charlene and Rachel, you guys could probably speak to this as well, that there's a notice that'll go out that'll kind of highlight what's required so that you guys can get all hands on deck to assist with any catastrophe that's going on. Do you want to discuss do you guys offer all 4 of these options, if public adjusters, staff adjusters, independent?
Charlene, I'll take this one first.
Okay.
Thank you again, SILA, for the invitation. Yes, in Rhode Island, we have one license that covers both company and independent adjusters, one license that covers public adjusters, and we do emergency licensing through NIPR. So as long as there's power, we are licensing people. And also in a true catastrophe where, say, me and my team don't have power, the regulators will get together across the country to make sure that licensing does not stop, at least in some situations. So that would apply to us here in Rhode Island. Complicates things a little bit with designated home state stuff, but we'll get into that later. We also do designated home state adjuster licensing. And Charlene, on the West Coast?
Yes, ours is pretty similar to what your definitions are here. We do not license company adjusters. They are actually not even the independent insurance adjuster licensing doesn't even apply to company or staff adjusters. Our independent adjusters are kind of unique. And the reason why they're unique, even though your definition that's up here is correct, we have individuals who are called qualified managers. And the qualified manager could be a licensed independent adjuster, or it could be just an individual who would have to, they have to pass the adjuster license exam, and they also have to submit an application. But then they also have to submit to the department what is called a personal identification information, which is it's an LIC form 31A, and this provides the information we need to have to make sure that this person is marked as a qualified manager, because unlicensed individuals, because what we have is independent adjusters and the qualified managers can actually hire employees who are not licensed to just adjust claims at any time. California is the only state that allows for unlicensed claims adjusters to adjust claims. That's partly the reason why we have maybe 2,500 licensed independent insurance adjusters, is because each one of these that have a qualified manager have multiple employees underneath them. And so, but the qualified manager is actually the one who oversees the entire business of that adjuster firm, or even their own staff of employees. And so that is one of the things that is different that we have here. Those employees must be registered with the California Department of Insurance. There's a form that they can submit, but we also have the adjuster online application, which is really it's an online service that is the appointment service or the employment service that we have. And what we have done to that too is we've enhanced that to include the bonding information that we'll be talking about later as well. Regarding the emergency adjusters, we do have those individuals who are employees. And for us to have an emergency that where we have to go forward and ask for individuals, the commissioner actually has to declare an emergency situation. Also, our governor may declare an emergency, but when the commissioner declares an emergency situation, that is when the qualified manager has to have their employees sign a certification that they have read and they know our notice, our annual notice that we send to them on any updated laws on adjusting, as well as our guide. That person has to sign that under penalty of perjury. Otherwise, that person cannot adjust claims. It has to be sent to us within 15 days if that were to happen. When the governor sends out an emergency declaration, what happens there is the qualified manager has to ensure that the individual that's adjusting the claims, the employees that are registered, have read that notice. Also, insurers have to give that notice to their claimants within 15 days of submitting the claim. So those are a couple of items that are different from maybe other states.
Thank you, guys. It's always interesting to hear, like, every state's different, and especially in adjuster licensing, we'll get further into that too, that it's just varies so much by state. And especially with you guys, how, like you said, you in California, it's independent adjusters, you don't have a staff adjuster. And then in Rhode Island, you guys, it's one license that kind of encompasses both. So it is it's interesting to hear just kind of both of your perspectives, since your states vary so much and what you offer and the requirements. So thank you guys for that. This is just kind of a high level overview at a glance look of what your staff adjusters and independent adjuster requirements are going to be across the country. You have your purple states are going to be your independent adjuster licensed states. And then the yellow states are going to be states that offer a staff and an independent adjuster license. And if it was that easy, even within the yellow states, you're going to have kind of a variation between, like Rhode Island, you guys have a license that encompasses both, but you're also going to have some states like New Mexico and Kentucky and Nevada where they offer a staff adjuster and an independent adjuster license. So it's, if you're applying for an adjuster license, it's important to double check what you need and then what the state requirements are, because they do vary vastly between all the states. And then the white states are going to be your states that don't require a license. So then the question becomes, if you live in this state like Illinois or Missouri and you want to be a staff or an independent adjuster, what do you do? Because you can't get a resident license. So that brings us to the lovely designated home state. So the 2008 Independent Adjuster Licensing Guideline defines the home state as below, and it varies a lot differently, of course, than the producer definition, where if the resident state does not license adjusters for the line of authority sought, the adjuster shall designate his, her, or its home state as any state in which the independent adjuster or staff adjuster is licensed and in good standing. So essentially, this designated home state was created to try and make this a little bit easier for everyone involved, that you can qualify as essentially a resident in another state, and you would have to qualify by whatever the requirements are in that state. That would usually includes an exam requirement. There's typically a background check or fingerprint requirement involved, and then continuing education, which we'll get to continuing education in a little bit, because that also definitely varies from state to state. And there are some challenges with the designated home state. Not all DHS licenses are created equal. Wyoming and Oklahoma accept only specific designated home states. They want to make sure that the home state that you're using has a continuing education requirement. And Alaska and Arizona have a rule where they don't recognize designated home states at all. So if you live in Missouri and you have a DHS, you're using Texas or Indiana, and you want to do business in Alaska or Arizona, they will require you to test, because their state requirements don't recognize the DHS, so they are going to require you to exam. And then some states might require proof of a DHS exam prior to approving a non-resident application. I know I've seen this with some states, because I would like to think that all adjusters are honest, but sometimes it's like, oh, I'm using North Carolina as my DHS. Well, North Carolina reports as a non-resident, and a non-resident state might want to say, all right, how do I verify that you've actually taken an exam? Can you show me a proof that you've qualified for this in some capacity? So, I personally am a little bit of a data hoarder, that I would hold on to my exam score for the rest of my life to make sure that I have that in a file somewhere in case it's ever requested, because it's always good to have some kind of proof that you've qualified for the DHS in some capacity. So Charlene and Rachel, do you, either of your states, do you accept DHS? Do you offer the DHS? And then what kind of requirements would be for surrounding what would someone need to do to get a DHS in either of your state?
And Rachel, I'll start this time.
Yes.
California does accept designated home states. Of course, we do not offer a designated home state, especially speaking about the independent insurance adjuster, because California is not reciprocal with any states. We tried our best to have our laws changed.
A very hard fought effort.
Oh, it's so painful. In 2016, it made it to the governor's office, but it was vetoed at that location. And then we tried again in 2018, but it was held in Senate Appropriations Committee because it wasn't part of the wildfire package. But we did try our best, but we do accept DHS states that come to us, and we can verify everything that needs to be done. And we certainly comply with that. So, but we do have DHS for our public insurance adjusters, even though it's really not needed now.
We do not have that in Rhode Island. We do not have DHS for public adjusters, but that's not, let's not complicate things too much here. So Rhode Island, yes, we do permit someone who lives in a state that doesn't offer an independent adjuster license or a company adjuster license to qualify just as if they were a Rhode Island resident, nothing different. And we report that information to the PDB. Our team here in Rhode Island, we really rely on the PDB, so the producer database, which is what I call the world, right? It is the world. It is our snapshot to verify that what you have told us, thank you, Caitlin,
yes,
is correct, or to verify that an applicant has told us something that is correct. So we don't just accept, we verify. Yes. And then accept. So us regulators, we are definitely trying to work together to make sure that the information that's on the PDB is reliable, even for us, not just for you, but also for us. Many strides have happened in that space, and a lot of times the regulators will call each other and just be like, "Hey, did you know that if you did this, it would be easier for lots of other adjuster states?" And that person will be like, "Oh, I had no idea." So we're not the enemies. We do talk to each other, and we're trying to make sure it's as smooth as our laws and regulations will allow us to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And we
exactly.
appreciate that. And this slide kind of definitely shows what Rachel was talking about in terms of, designated home state reporting. If you've, you recently hired an adjuster and you're trying to figure out what their home state is, the PDB is a great tool to take a look and see where, what DHS are they using, and then what is the non-resident reporting. So on the left-hand screen there, it shows Texas as an example, that Texas is a state that has the DHS listed as their license class. And there's a couple other states listed there that also do it that way. That will show that, that is how Texas reports it. And that basically shows that, they've qualified to use them as a designated home state. Now, Texas has, when they switched to the designated home state license class in 2011, I know previously individuals that were using Texas as a non-resident qualified for it as a DHS, but they just did not have this license class. So it's possible that you might have an adjuster that's just held that license as a DHS for a very long time, and it just never got converted over. So, if you do have somebody that's saying, no, I've used Texas as my DHS and I tested for it, back in 2005, it's good to get in touch with Texas to see, do you still have the exam on file? What would be needed to convert this to the designated home state, so it doesn't cause any confusion in obtaining or maintaining non-resident licenses. And then on the right-hand side is an example of somebody that would hold a North Carolina license that's using Louisiana as their DHS. That highlighted DHS field is great to see, all right, North Carolina is reporting the correct DHS. And if it wasn't, you'd want to reach out to North Carolina to update that record to let them know, John Doe is using Louisiana. They, as their DHS, this is what do we need to do to correct this? Because you don't want, North Carolina to go down in the event that, you're using Texas now and you never notify North Carolina and they still think you're using Louisiana and your Louisiana license is no longer active. That could cause potential issues in trying to maintain your non-resident licenses. So
there is a lot of value sometimes in us having to figure out what someone is trying to say. So we manually verify every applicant that tells us they have a DHS. We look at it, and if it doesn't look right, we're reaching out and we're like, wait a minute, you've got Connecticut in 8 states, you've said Rhode Island in a few other states, and we're not even reporting that. So it can be a very eye-opening experience for the authorized submitter, the licensee, the
department,
the compliance department.
Yes, yeah, I know, definitely. I've seen some PDVs where you get an adjuster and it's like, what is going on here? You've got like all these states and are reporting something different. So it's definitely, you want to just keep an eye on that and make sure that it's all streamlined and updated, and the states are reporting what they need to correctly to avoid any potential issues. Like the above shows kind of a snapshot of what the SBS system is going to show in terms of, they have a designated home state field at the end of their website that's going to list what the home state is. So if North Carolina is an SBS state, so I keep pointing them out, if somebody was using North Carolina as their DHS, it's going to report itself in that highlighted field. That basically is North Carolina's way of saying, this person is using us as their DHS and we're reporting ourselves as the DHS because we recognize that they have qualified to use us as a DHS.
Just mentioning that there's a couple of things in the chat that are making us laugh.
I don't have the chat pulled up.
That's okay.
Oh.
We're not laughing at you, Caitlin. We're really laughing at Bob. I mean, thank you.
So it's like sometimes you'd like to believe that they're truthful, but sometimes it's like, all right, you got to figure out what DHS are they truly using and the bottom of it. And I think the technology has come a long way, even just from when I've started doing adjuster licensing, that a lot of states are using this field online, and the SBS. I know a lot of states have transitioned to SBS, which makes it very easy and user friendly to kind of determine what the person's DHS profile is.
Yeah.
Truthfully, we could talk about DHS for the entire hour, but we're not going to.
Yes, yeah. Well, if anybody loves to talk about designated home states, just putting in a plug for the SILA conference in Seattle. We will have a semester open forum hosted by the South Steering Committee. So if you have any passion for designated home state issues, that is definitely the place to bring this to the table and generate some great conversation.
Or bring your suggestions to the first uniform adjuster
yes
group whenever I get that going. I'm working on it.
That sounds like a great idea.
We'll get there. Another thing that's unique with lines of authority and adjuster licensing, I've also dealt with producers where it's very straightforward with lines of authority. Every state pretty much offers the same thing, and that's not necessarily the case here with adjusters. Your main lines of authority, of course, are going to be your property, your casualty, workers' comp, and crop, which crop is its own kind of thing where you're going to have other federal requirements you have to comply with. So for main purposes, property, casualty, workers' comp is what we refer to as the big three in the industry. And that usually is what falls under your all lines license. An all lines license, which of course is going to vary by state, but for the most part is going to include property, casualty, and workers' comp. But some states offer limited lines license. I was just looking at exams the other day, and New York, I think, offers 9 lines of authority for their adjuster licenses that you can take multiple exams for multiple different lines. But that's not going to translate to the standard that a lot of the other states have. So that can kind of cause an issue if you have somebody that holds a motor vehicle or an accident and health license, whether or not, are they going to be eligible for property and casualty or workers' comp? So what for California, you guys, it's just the property and casualty, and then Rhode Island, you offer property, casualty, workers' comp
and crop.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was going to say. We have property, casualty, as well as crop, right, for independent adjusters.
And I just want to point out that there was a time when people just applied for a crop license in Rhode Island because they didn't have to have an exam to do that. And we're a very small state geographically, and I don't think there's a big market for crop adjusters.
I was gonna
So
say, I can't
we
believe what does Rhode Island
we
grow?
we went through a lot of refund requests, people yelling at us. So we actually stop people from applying for just crop to avoid headaches from everyone all around. So just a plug for any time that we can try to improve the process on the applicant's end. Can't get in your brain, but we can certainly try to help.
Well, California has 32 crop adjusters, so and insurance adjusters. So yeah, at least it shows you the volume, I guess.
It's a very, just from my time working on the SILA charts, I know that there was the SILA crop chart that is a very niche market of crop adjusters. That it's a very small market of people that do that, but very important work still. I don't want to discredit that, but mainly the work that the main ones we talk about are going to be your property casualty, workers' comp. And then your license requirements are, of course, going to vary different by states. With your producer licenses, you're going to be applying just for, most states don't have a lot of extra things you need to do, but with adjusters, they're very unique in that regard. You're going to have some states that are like California and New Mexico, where for independent adjusters, you're going to have to provide financial responsibility. And I know California, you guys just kind of changed that a little bit. Do you want to speak to the bond requirement in California?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, they have to be 18 years old. They have to pass a qualifying exam, except if they're a non-resident public adjuster, because we're uniform with that. That's the one we did get through on 2016. But yeah, we do have to submit fingerprints. The individual has to submit an application, 2 copies of the passport size photos, 2 years of certificates, 2 years certified experience in the insurance adjusting field. But then here comes the bonds. There's the adjuster bond, independent adjuster for $2,000. And we did, we were able to put through a sort of like limitation on the bonds or exemption for the bond. And that's basically if your qualified manager or your adjusting firm has filed a bond with the department, and that bond included the names of all of those who are exempt or who would be working under that bond, all of those individuals under that bond do not have to submit a bond. $2,000 independent adjuster bond, in comparison to the public adjuster bond, that's $20,000, but there's no exemptions for that one. Sorry. But yeah, so it's the qualified manager who is overseeing the person that's going to be overseeing the entire business of the entity, and so they make sure that the bond is up to date, that it doesn't expire, and then those individuals are exempt who are under that bond that have been submitted with it. That is correct. Yep. Oh, and then also I just wanted to mention on the last slide, you had workers' compensation there. California does not license workers' compensation adjusters. They go through a rigorous education, and they are claims adjusters that are actually under the oversee of the Department of Industrial Relations.
I am feverishly responding to chat things.
Yes, I bet.
So I just want to say, before I talk about Rhode Island's licensing requirements, because they're uncomplicated and boring, multiple DHSs, there's been questions in the chat. There should be very limited circumstances where having more than one DHS is right. And if you live in a state that offers adjuster licensing, you should be getting a license in that state, not seeking another DHS.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. For example, in Rhode Island, we do offer people who live in a state that don't do adjuster licensing to use us, just like I said earlier, and we will issue a designated home state and treat you just like a resident in a faraway land. But a Rhode Island resident is not going to be allowed to go to Oklahoma, for example, and get a designated home state status. And I believe that Oklahoma would even stop that from happening. So no, you can't shop around for DHSs. We're trying to get this as close to producer licensing as possible. So I will comment on our licensing requirements in Rhode Island. Like many other states, we follow the the NAIC's independent adjuster guidelines, and just like producers, we will require an exam, a criminal background check, and money, right? Money has to be paid for that. and I feel like I'm missing something, but we don't have continuing education. We don't have a pre-licensing education component. Those are two things that are uniform and standard that we are an outlier on. We are working on the CE part of that though. So I think I've answered that question.
Yeah. And then just a couple other notes about some of the other application requirements you might run into. As you can see with New Mexico, even within, the adjuster licenses they offer, the requirements going to be different. Where if you're an independent adjuster license, they will require that financial responsibility. But if you're a staff adjuster, they want a carrier appointment. I know Vanessa was on the call yesterday. She's the director there in New Mexico, that she said they are working on trying to get rid of that bond requirement. So I guess that's something we're gonna have to keep an eye on. I know when New York got rid of the bond requirement, I think there was a collective scream of excitement that we didn't have to do that anymore. So it's kind of, slowly moving in that direction where it seems like that might not be a requirement, but as of right now, you do still need to file that bond. And then Mississippi does have an affidavit that's needed to be filed. When I first started in adjuster licensing, they just offered one adjuster license that was an all lines license. And then they went through a change where now they offer an all lines license and a workers' comp only license. But what about the people who only hold property and casualty? They require this affidavit if you're applying as a non-resident there that certifies that you're not going to do workers' comp since your home state or your license does not have PC. They at least are going to let you get that all lines license. You just have to file something additional. It says, you're not going to do workers' comp because you don't have it in your home state. And then of course, exam requirements for non-residents are going to vary by state. I know California, unfortunately, that means a lot of your residents, because you guys require an exam. A lot of non-resident states require an exam for people from California. New York and Hawaii are also kind of lumped in that too, that Oregon and Oklahoma are going to require you to take the test, as well as Alabama. And then CE is something else too that's a little bit unique with adjusters, where if you have a home state where you don't have a CE requirement, you might have to comply with it or show proof that you're completing it somewhere for a non-resident license renewal. Which this is kind of just a picture of across the country what the continuing education requirements are. Your blue states have a CE requirement for residents or DHS. Your yellow states do not. And then I did want to put Vermont. I wasn't sure how to flag them in there because Vermont does not require CE for their PC adjusters, but they do have a seminar that needs to be completed to renew the workers' comp license. So that one's a little bit unique. So there is something that needs to be done for workers' comp in Vermont, but not for the PC one. So continuing education can get a little bit tricky if you live in a state or have a home state like Michigan or New York, where you're not going to have continuing education. You might have to show proof to some non-resident licenses if you hold a non-resident license, where they're going to want to know where you're doing that CE. When you apply for the license in those states, they do ask on the application, where are you taking your continuing education credits? What's your home state? So nobody gets a free pass on CE. They're going to find you eventually. They're going to want to know you're doing it somewhere. So I know a lot of these states are working on trying to get some kind of continuing education requirement. I know, Rachel, you said that you're working on that. Is that?
I'm working on it. It causes a lot of grief, I think, for insurance companies and licensees to keep track of CE credits for our Rhode Island residents in other states. We are working on it, and don't quote me, but I'm trying for April 1st. It doesn't require a legislative lift. It does require a regulatory review. So my fingers are crossed, and I'm getting all my ducks in a row, all of our ducks in a row to make that happen. So more information, and that will just get me out of having to say all the time, well, we are an outlier, but I definitely support uniformity.
I know, it's hard. I know, Jeff from the state of Washington, I think he had said that it took him like almost nine or 10 years to finally get that to, get pushed through, that it is one of those things that's hard to get through. And, we appreciate the effort that you're doing the best that you can. And that's all, you can hope for. And that's kind of another thing I did want to talk about, that I think and especially with adjuster licensing, we kind of get hung up on, we have these same conversations every year at SILA, and we have these same, it just feels like sometimes we could just talk in circles, and it just seems like sometimes it's just not getting better. But, if you take a step back and really kind of look at some of the changes that have gone through over the years, even just from well, I say the short stint I've been in adjuster licensing, but I guess coming up on 10 years, it's starting to become my life now. When I first started, I used to get, paper checks delivered to my desk from finance for all these paper applications I used to have to send. And as you can see, that it's kind of over the years, NIPR has become available for adjusters, and New York moved to the state website, and Texas and California, you went to Circon, and that I think is huge. And especially when you think about like how chaotic the past couple of years have been with people working remote, that I don't think we would have been able to navigate the remote working of 2020 and the pandemic without being able to submit electronically. I can't even imagine the logistics of having to send people to the office during stay-at-home orders of trying to file these applications. And I think that's a huge testament to everybody involved, from NIPR and Circon and you guys at the state level too, that we're all advocating, we're all in this together, that we're all trying to move this into current times and electronic, and making this easier for everybody. And that kind of also is with the continuing education, like you said, Rachel, that it's you're trying your best. And Jeff said that it took several years to get Washington to get it to go through, and that's kind of something we need to exercise a little bit of patience with, that there might be some legislation involved, and it gets rejected, and then it gets brought up every year, and then it's that's currently what's kind of going on with New York. They've got pending legislation about having a continuing education requirement. I would hope it goes through, but I know just from my experience that they seem to introduce it every year, and unfortunately it gets shot down. So I know we're working in the right direction. It's just sometimes it just take a little while, but I just wanted to kind of include this as a, there are improvements, even if sometimes it feels like we talk about the same things about uniformity and reciprocity, and it's slowly getting there. I think it's definitely been some changes over the years.
Also, just hats off to SILA for doing what they do and bringing industry regulators and all of us together to talk about all of these things. It affects our daily lives. I'd like to just make a comment about the paper applications. I love this slide. It's crazy to me that even in 2016, 2015, 16, we were seeing here in Rhode Island stacks of paper applications. And it wasn't because we were not accepting electronic applications, because we've had an electronic application, the NIPR services, for as long as they've had them. It was because we hadn't taken some real deep dives into our business rules that behave in the background, which is us telling NIPR how we would like them to handle their applications. So 2016, Rhode Island says, okay, I can't be tracking paper applications in a spreadsheet. This is crazy. So we get maybe 20 paper applications a month, and it's because of one scenario. I'm just going to tell everybody, okay? Because it affects you. If you're an adjuster who is passionate about producer licensing and you're holding on to your resident producer license, but you live in a state that doesn't offer adjuster licensing, you're not getting through NIPR to Rhode Island. That is a paper application. If you say, but Rachel, for the last 3 ones, I was able to get through, and I look at your PDB and I say that in January of 2022, you decided to get a resident producer license. That is the reason why you have to do a paper application. And you might say one final thing. Well, just let them through and check it. The number of people that just send themselves through an application without checking the right boxes off is huge. So processing a refund request in Rhode Island takes 5 levels of approval and 3 state agencies. I will do whatever it takes to make sure we do not have to do that.
And you are not alone in that. I know what you said about how you guys do need paper if you have a, the producer resident license, and you're from a state that doesn't license adjusters. That I know we kind of run into that issue where we see some people who have the Pennsylvania appraiser license, which Pennsylvania does not license the IAs or the staff, haven't made that, but that causes a little bit of a technical issue in filing where we have to send some paper in occasionally. So Rhode Island, you're not alone when you do say that that paper is still occasionally required depending on the individual's kind of unique scenario.
Oh, can I just say one more thing? I'm sorry. So
Mhm.
in that exact scenario where someone is renewing, I just want to tell anybody that cares that we will accept a PDF version of that application, but you still have to mail the check to us. So if it's a paper application, I'm not saying you have to print it out, write it out with your pen, and then mail it. You can. Many people still do because it's easier to track the application and the money at the same time. But we've got a small team. We all talk to each other. If you're going to send along a PDF to our licensing team and mail a check, we'll find it.
You know, there's so many ins and outs with California's licensing of independent insurance adjusters that, and just to let everyone on the call know, we're going to be looking at our web pages on our requirements, the requirements for our independent and public insurance adjusters, and we're going to clean up those web pages so that they're simpler to follow, such as before your renewal, make sure that your bond is active. Make sure you have nothing that's going to slow you down from being able to have that that license, that your license renewed, or even, you know, the license issued, so that you have those steps followed, because there's little things you have to do if you're going to be doing one thing or the other. So we are going to be opening that up relatively soon. Yeah.
That's exciting. Definitely gonna have to keep an eye out for that on anything to kind of clarify requirements. I think cuts down on phone calls, and emails, which then of course makes everybody's life a little bit easier. Some of the other current trends that are occurring in the industry right now, I know we talk a lot about addresses, and especially working from home, and especially with, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic completely changed kind of the work habits, well, not just in our industry, across the world, but a lot of people are working from home. And I know this was addressed at the 2020 virtual conference, but the conversation around addresses and business addresses and working from home was more like, you know, we're all trying to navigate this weird pandemic situation. Eventually, everyone's going to go back in the office. We just need to kind of weather the storm until we can get back there. And now that conversation is kind of turning into, that's not necessarily the case, that a lot of people are going to allow their staff to work from home, and technology is at a point where it's, you know, we can do that successfully. So there's kind of some challenges with that that have never really been discussed before. Is, you know, does the business address report as public information? That's a big concern for individuals. They don't want that information out there. They don't want disgruntled people showing up at their house. And then, can an individual use a business address that they aren't physically located at? So I guess California and Rhode Island, do you guys require a physical business address? Do you know what address reports publicly? And then what kind of like challenges from a state perspective do you see with, you know, working from home and addresses in that regard?
Did you want me to start, Rachel? I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, for the business, yeah, we have several places where it is that the business address is listed publicly. We have the Check a License, Find an Agent or Broker, and the Home Insurance Finder. And I think we have a couple of other online services that provide where it is that the business address is, especially if the individual is there. The problem is that when the individual does use their residence as their business address, the home address will be on our website. It will be there because it is the business address. And we have authority to do this. We have to make it available on our website, and that's through our government code 6250 through 6276.5. And it doesn't violate the Public Records Act, because we actually had a hearing on this, and it was a medical physician who had his home address publicly out there, and he didn't want that there, so he challenged it. He went to our Supreme Court, and he lost, because by having that as his business address, that he is actually he's waiving the privacy interest on his resident license. So that's the reason why we want to really emphasize, if you want to have a business address there, you do not have to physically be at that location. You can give the business address of your qualified managers or the firm's business address, whatever address that they have as their business address. Please use that as the business address. But of course, your resident address, we need to know that one too. So that's how that is. And regarding the remote working, yes, we do have people that have moved in and out of California, and they have been looking to relocate because they can, remote work now, because there's teleworking, they can do this. And we have not had any problems with that so far, as long as they give us the physical business address. That's what we need to have, is we need to know where it is, and it needs to be a location and not a PO box.
mostly the same. So yes, for Rhode Island, the city, state, and zip code for your business address is available just by looking somebody up, not the street part of that. And obviously the resident, well, I don't want to say obviously, but the resident address is definitely not made available. Did have a situation recently where somebody sent through, oh, here's all my updated information, and gave it to us all at the same time so we could see it. And I could see that it was his residence address. And I was like, you might want to make sure that you don't do that, because even though it doesn't display right there, it is still subject to request. Somebody could just call up and say, hey, can I get that? And we have no reason to deny that request. So if someone is working out of their home, I think still probably work for a company, probably filing taxes because they're getting income from someplace. That place is the place that should probably be listed in the business address.
Thank you for that. And then I know, just as kind of a additional information for other individuals on the call too, that Linda Brunette has been organizing and creating a SILA chart that's going to kind of put all this information in one location that I think is going to be very helpful once it's all finalized. I think right now it's currently at the point where we're just waiting on some state responses for this, and it's going to house that information of what does report publicly on the state website, and what address do you guys require a physical business address, or can you use a headquartered address of the company you work for? And so there is more to come on that, and I think that will be good to a resource to have as this kind of remote working thing becomes more the norm, of answering a lot of questions on what address should I be using, because you don't want to be using a fake address obviously, but you just want to make sure that if I'm using my home address, is there a risk that might be, like you said, if somebody calls and asks for the business address, you guys would not have a reason to deny sending that information out. So I think that's that will be a good resource and tool to use once that does become available.
Just a comment, a couple of chat questions and comments about this in there. If the business address in another state is getting pushback from some states, I mean, Rachel Chester in Rhode Island can't imagine the reason why, but I'd love to hear more about that so I can think about it and figure out why that might happen, just out of curiosity. But also, there's a comment in here that says many companies are closing their office locations, so there's no company address to provide as the adjuster's business address. I mean, that person just needs to know that their residence address is subject to disclosure. And I get weekly data requests from list marketing companies that I can't deny. So I still am providing all of this information when it's asked to be provided for. People just need to make sure they use discretion and think about it thoroughly.
Yeah, and if a company is closing, I mean, their offices are closing, that company must be someplace, because this person is employed by someone, and so somehow there's got to be an address there someplace. So hopefully they can research with that company. If you're closing this address, what business address should I use? And that's what I would do, definitely.
And I see one more second, Kay. When I see Alaska, someone saying that Alaska requires the business physical address is located in the licensee's resident state. I would encourage them to come visit Rhode Island. I can throw a rock to Massachusetts. I can throw a rock to Connecticut. If we were to have that same rule, we would have very little people in the business contributing to the marketplace in Rhode Island. Just saying that.
Yeah, in California, the independent adjuster can have business addresses that are outside the state, and they can have branch offices outside the state as well, because we have to know where their branch offices are. But a public adjuster does have to have a location in California, because they have a contract with an individual who needs to come and talk with them. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Okay. And then another issue that we love to talk about, the word uniformity.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know.
Well, we're almost at the end of the webinar.
I know, right? We'll try to keep this. I know we got this one and one more hot topic here, so I'll try to keep this one as short as possible, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. Like I said earlier, your property casualty, workers' comp are going to be your common lines of authority. And that workers' comp is going to be the one that causes a little bit of a issue and friction, depending on where you live or what your home state is and what you're trying to obtain in other states. Some states will include workers' comp under their casualty line of authority. Some states do not license for workers' comp. And then you also have the issue of some individuals who might be using Texas as their DHS, where they held all lines and then they move to another state that does not license for workers' comp. When they transfer that license, is, the question then becomes is, do they need to maintain a DHS for that line that's not offered in their home state? Can they maintain other licenses based on, they technically qualified for workers' comp at one point, they just now have moved to a state that doesn't do it. So I guess, how do Rhode Island, and I'm interested to hear from both of you because your states handle lines of authority and this kind of vastly differently. How do you guys handle applicants who want an LOA that they don't have in their home state? Do you guys require any kind of proof of it being included under a different line if it's included under a different line? If you could provide just some feedback on the lines of authority, that would be awesome.
So I'll start with this one and I'll make it quick. I have benefited Rhode Island has benefited tremendously from the hard work of other regulators who have made charts with identifying whether work comp is included, not excluded, etc. So we actually rely on those resources, and my team verifies this stuff. They have most of it memorized, I think, at this point. But we rely on the PDB. If somebody tells us that they have a DHS in a state and that state says, yep, they got our DHS, carrying on. The really complex situation that you started this conversation off with, I'm not sure how we would handle it because I haven't been presented with that, but I have been thinking about the work comp reciprocity and line of authority thing a lot lately. Go ahead, Charlene.
Okay, thanks. As I had said previously, independent insurance adjuster, we are not reciprocal. We have actually laws from consumer services since 1980. And so it's the kind of thing where we're just like, okay, well, we'll just keep working with what we have. I know we're not reciprocal. I know we require the exam. I am so sorry we are not uniform. I'm going to try my best to see if I can introduce the bill again. And I did try it last year, but it wasn't a part of the program yet. So as I'm finding out others like that, I will see what I could do to continue to push that. The public insurance adjuster is uniform because it does match the Producer Licensing Model Act, and that all happened graciously for them in 2016. But California does not license workers' compensation adjusters. And that is actually under Department of General of Industrial Relations. But one thing that the department does do, and this is what an individual can do if they would like to start adjusting claims for workers' comp in California, is that there's a training requirement, and it is the insurer that is the one that makes sure that these individuals complete this training and that they're certified by having this completed. We are the ones that receive the reports on which adjusters or the number of adjusters that had actually gotten this certification completed, and it is in California Insurance Code 11761, and it is more detailed in our regulations in 2592 through 2592.14. But yeah, that training is multiple. It's like 180 hours to be a claims adjuster for workers' comp. And this is, then it's renewed once you're certified by the insurer, but it is the insurer's responsibility under our rules here.
It's very interesting just how different you guys, with the workers' comp. And I know workers' comp is a conversation, we could talk for hours on, and this will be part of our adjuster presentation in Seattle. There will be a component about workers' comp and kind of talking about this. So it's definitely a conversation that's very current right now, and is, things that a lot of people just don't think about, when it comes to reciprocity and kind of maintaining or obtaining that line in other states, because it is a very unique line and has its own challenges with it. I did want to move on to our next and last current adjuster topic, because I know we're running out of time here. The staff versus independent adjuster licenses. I know yesterday, if anyone on the call attended the SALS meeting yesterday, this was something that was discussed, and Wyoming and New Mexico were both on that call, provided great feedback with a lot of questions and answers regarding this change. But there were 2 notices from both of these states that were released, and they are available on the SILA website, I think under the regulatory update side, if you want to read the full text of it, but essentially stating that a staff adjuster must obtain an independent adjuster license if the resident state does not restrict a staff adjuster from obtaining that license. From you guys' standpoint, from just 2 different states, what do you see any issues that might arise during the license process if you issue a staff adjuster license or an independent adjuster license to a staff adjuster? Do your states restrict that availability, any kind of, just feedback on this issue would be great.
I'm not aware of many states that restrict it. I think it's a short list. I think it's a super short list. The call yesterday, for anybody who was on it, there was some great historical perspective provided from some folks who were around the table when the independent adjuster, the NAIC independent adjuster licensing guidelines were created. So in Rhode Island, I'm going to just, gosh, we don't have enough time for this. I'll give it a real brief thing. In 2015, I think we went from one license called claim adjusters to 3 licenses: a company license, an independent license, and a public adjuster. The number of people that moved back and forth between company and independent adjuster was insane. We were doing manual workarounds for people because I started asking a lot of questions. Well, why would you do that? Apparently it happens a lot. So we said smushing them into one license, company/independent adjuster license. Why did we do that? Well, from our perspective, there was no reason not to. They take the same licensing exam. They have to provide a background check, all the same stuff as each other. It's just who's paying them that's different. So there were some concerns brought up about that on the call yesterday. I bet we're going to talk about it more because I still don't quite wrap my arms around what the legal concerns are from a perjury type of standpoint. But I'm sorting it out, and I think that in majority of cases it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in California, we do not license staff adjusters, as you know. So it's just what I've been saying over and over again. So sorry for saying this, but with New Mexico and Wyoming's requirements, though, that requirement does not break any of California's laws. But what it does do, though, is it does impact the insurer and the employee, or the employee-employer relationship that is going on there, because our independent insurance adjusters have to have a contract with their insurers that they're adjusting claims for. So, that's one of the things that they would have to worry about. And so that's between the employee-employer. The company or staff adjuster who applies for an independent insurance adjuster license in California, we would process it just as we do any other independent insurance adjuster license. It's I don't even know that we would know that this would be a staff adjuster applying. So we would just process it and renew it and do as we do with all of our bond stuff and the exemptions. Yeah.
Same. And I make the case that we would accept someone's application if they didn't even have an employer. So, what if you want to go get your license and then market yourself to get a job? I mean, sometimes people do it in that order instead of getting the job and then getting the license.
Yeah, and I know that this is kind of an ever-evolving thing that, New Mexico and Wyoming said yesterday that there is going to be, some more additional information, and they are reviewing kind of what states, they are going to reciprocate with or not reciprocate with. And they did provide some great feedback on, if your home state doesn't require CE. New Mexico, I think, said that they wanted to just see proof that you're doing it somewhere. So that session was recorded and will be available, I think, probably next week, if not the week after. So if you did not attend and you missed that, definitely recommend giving that a listen. And if you do have any questions, of course, reach out to those states directly for any additional clarification or questions regarding this. But I think, Julie, I see you popped back on here. We're running out of time.
This has been a fantastic webinar, and we've had a lot of participation in the chat. I want to thank our panel. If anybody wants to meet Caitlin or Charlene or Rachel in person, please be sure to join us for the SILA National Conference, which is being held in Seattle, Washington in October. So we hope to see you there. And I'm telling you, they are just as much fun in person as they are on a webinar panel. They are hilarious. Also, just so you know, if you want more education, if you really liked what was shared here today, SILA is going to be giving an adjuster licensing advanced pre-conference class in September 20th and 21st. And SILA membership and conference registration will not be required for the virtual class. So please go to SILA.org for more information on those. But I want to thank all three of you for being with us. This has been amazingly helpful. I can't tell you, although I will be getting with Mr. Bogman to find out why he wasn't on the call.
Thank you.
But anyways, I wanted to remind everybody, the SILA Foundation is, of course, separate from the SILA organization. The SILA Foundation is mainly geared towards education. And we bring you these webinars. The SILA Foundation brings you these webinars free of charge. And so any donations would be very helpful, and, you know, support of any sponsors if you want to sponsor. Our webinar programs and are all public, so you can access those. We have a library where you can go and look at prior webinars if you'd like to see some of those. And also remember, this PowerPoint will be sent out to everybody who was on the call, and it'll be sent with the survey. So please complete the survey. And if I see you at SILA, and I'm going to be coming up to you, asking you about participating and maybe doing a webinar. I already have a list of regulators from Charlene and Rachel on which regulators to approach. So, y'all under the bus. Did you see that? Anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us. We've had a great time. Please join us again next month in September, where Reg Ed will be sponsoring and doing a webinar for us. I believe that's right, Caitlin?
Yes, that is correct. There'll be more information to come on that.
So be looking for some emails coming out on next month's webinar, and I hope to see everybody at the SILA National Conference in October. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Everyone.
Thank
You
you,
too.
everyone.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.